46 days. 46 days chasing a signal that did not have a source. And then the dark coughed up a shape.
Captain, mass reading. 40,000 clicks off our nose. It wasn't there 10 minutes ago.
Bridge of the Meridian Fault. Mid-burn. The viewport glow set to combat dim because Saya likes the sensor returns clean, and I had stopped arguing with her about it 3 weeks ago. I leaned over the passive scan and watched a silhouette resolve out of nothing. Geometric. Unlit. Not drifting, not tumbling. It had no transponder. It did not answer the standard hail. It did not answer the second hail either, which I sent because pretending things were normal had become a habit I was reluctant to break. There is a particular feeling you get, flying long range, when the universe stops behaving the way the manuals said it would. It is not fear. Fear comes later, after you have processed what you are looking at. This is something quieter. It is the feeling of being a very small animal that has just understood a larger animal has been in the room with it the whole time. Cross came onto the bridge without being called. I don't know how he knew. He stopped behind my chair and looked at the screen for a long time. I have known Harlan Cross for 46 days. I have never seen him look at anything the way he looked at that screen. Chapter 1. Mass where none should be. Amara pulled the architecture out of the passive scan and put it on the main display. It was a station, not a ship. The shape was wrong for a ship. Too symmetric, too patient. 3 habitation rings stacked off a central spine. 2 docking arms. One of them was bent. The other looked clean. She zoomed the construction signature.
Mid-21st century, pre-sprint. The radiator geometry is wrong for anything built after 65.
Define wrong.
Inefficient. Honest. Nobody builds like that anymore because nobody has to.
I looked at the silhouette and tried to fit it against any orbital architecture I knew. The proportions were wrong in the way old buildings are wrong on a planet. Slightly too generous with their volumes, slightly too willing to commit material to a problem that a modern engineer would solve with software. It was a station built by people who did not trust elegance. Saya was at navigation. She had been quiet since the mass reading hit, which was not unusual. What was unusual was the shape of her quiet. She was not running threat profiles. She was running history.
No debris field, no drift signature, no vector.
Meaning?
Meaning it did not arrive, it is here.
I asked the obvious question and got the obvious answer. No SDC registry. No Continental Compact entry. No Martian record. No commercial filing. No chart we had access to placed a station at these coordinates. The station was not on any map because, as far as every map we carried was concerned, the station did not exist. I will say this for the SDC. When they decide to keep a thing off the books, they do the work. 42 years of charts. 42 years of survey passes by independent operators, by mining consortiums, by the kind of long-range scanning ships that had no reason to lie about what they had seen. And not one of them had ever filed a return on this particular volume of space. Either the station had been hidden, or the data had been hidden, or both. Cross had not moved. He was still standing behind my chair. I turned to look at him. Harlan. He took a breath like a man who had been waiting 42 years to take it.
This is where the Ardennes arrived in 2063.
The bridge went very quiet. Saya's hand stopped on the console. Amara turned slowly.
It is not the source of the signal. It was never the source. It is the station that was built to study the signal. When we arrived, it was already operational, already crewed, already several years into the work.
Who built it?
I don't know.
Who staffed it?
I don't know.
Harlan, how was it kept off every chart in the system for 42 years?
I don't know that either. When the Ardennes went silent and I went into the pod, the station was fully staffed. Whatever happened to it happened after I went under. I have no information from that point forward.
He delivered it the way he delivered everything. Precise, qualified, no drama. Amara did not let it sit.
You knew there was a station here. When we arrived at the coordinates yesterday and found empty space, you said nothing.
I knew there was a station here in 2063.
That is not an answer, Harlan.
It is the complete answer. I knew what existed at these coordinates 42 years ago. I did not know what would exist here now. The station could have been retrieved, dismantled, destroyed by whatever event ended the Ardennes mission. When we arrived and the scan showed empty space, I concluded, correctly as of that moment, that it was gone.
You should have told us regardless.
A pause. The kind that in another man would have been defensive. In Cross it was something else. Inventory.
You're right.
That was the whole answer. No qualification. No context appended. He had not told us because he had not been ready to explain what the station was, and he had not been ready to explain what the station was because he had not known whether it would be there to confront. He had been waiting to see what the coordinates gave him before deciding how much of 2063 he was going to have to put on the table. That was the honest explanation, and we both knew it, and he did not say it, and he did not have to. All right, it's here now. Amara was already 2 steps ahead. She was looking at the station's passive profile on the secondary display, thinking about something.
The Ardennes lost navigation first, then communications. You told us that the systems went out one by one as you moved toward the source. The station is right here. It was operational for years. How?
It was purpose-built. The team that constructed it knew about the interference before they broke ground. Standard navigation architecture, the kind the Ardennes ran, uses active sensor arrays that the signal disrupts at close range. The station doesn't need navigation. It doesn't need propulsion. It doesn't move. The systems the signal attacks are exactly the systems a fixed research platform was designed to operate without. They built around the problem by not having the problem.
Passive sensors only.
Passive sensors, hardened local networking, no active drive systems generating interference of their own. The station and the signal were designed to coexist. Or rather, the station was designed by people who understood that coexistence was the only viable option.
Saya had been quiet through the confrontation. She spoke now, not looking up from her console.
And the fault?
Cross looked at her, then at the hull around us.
2 things. First, distance. The Ardennes systems degraded progressively as we moved deeper toward the source. We have not moved that far in. The interference is not a wall. It is a gradient. We are standing at the edge of it. Second, the Ardennes was built in 2041. Her navigation electronics were 2040s architecture. 64 years of hardware development sits between her systems and yours. Sprint drive ships run a fundamentally different nav and comm stack than anything flying in 2063. Whether that stack is more resistant or simply slower to fail, I cannot tell you. What I can tell you is that if we move much closer, we will start to find out.
Nobody argued with that. Declan noted it the way he noted things he intended to act on. Quietly, without confirming he'd heard. All right, it's here now. Let's go look at it. A man who had learned that drama was a luxury you could not afford when the answer was the only currency that mattered. 42 years of questions. The answer was on a screen at 40,000 kilometers and closing. I found Tomas in the corridor outside the bridge. He had come up from engineering to look at the long range himself, the way he always did when something on the bridge had gone unusually still. He had heard the silence on the intercom. He had drawn his own conclusions.
Are we boarding it?
Yeah.
I'll keep her warm.
That was the conversation. He turned and went back down the spine ladder. I stood there for a second longer than I needed to, listening to his footsteps recede, because I was about to walk a 4-person team into a 42-year-old grave, and I wanted to remember what a man who was staying behind sounded like. Chapter 2. Hard Dock. Tomas brought us in manually. There was no automated docking handshake to negotiate with. The station was not transmitting, and whatever protocols it had once spoken were not on file with anyone we could ask. He used the geometry. He matched the spin. He found a hard dock on the clean arm and held us there with thrust and patience while the magnetic clamps engaged. I have watched Tomas dock the fault in 100 conditions. I have never watched him dock her like this. He did not talk through it. He did not call corrections. He brought us in the way you bring a stretcher into a room where someone is asleep and might not be asleep. The seal held. Pressure differential nominal. Atmosphere on the other side. Stale, the scrubber readout said. Old air that had been recycled too many times by machinery that was running on the smallest possible fraction of its design power. But breathable. Something on the station still had electricity. It just wasn't answering. We suited up anyway. Soft suits, Helmet seals open, rebreathers staged. My first rule of boarding an unknown vessel: assume the air is lying to you until it has been lying for 10 minutes without consequences. Tomas. Comms check.
5 by 5. I've got your beacons. I've got the door.
If anything moves out there that isn't us, anything, you cut the clamps and you go.
I won't.
Tomas.
I heard you, Captain.
He did not say he would do it. We both noticed. The airlock cycled. The inner door of the station rolled back on a track that had not been oiled in 4 decades, and the sound it made was the sound of something being asked to remember what it was for. We stepped through. The light inside the station was the wrong color. That was the first thing I registered, before I registered anything else. The emergency illumination had degraded over 4 decades into a pale amber that did not quite reach into the corners of the corridors. Everything looked slightly underwater. Everything looked slightly remembered. The air smelled like nothing. That was the second thing. I had expected a smell. Decay. Dust. The metallic note of long dormant systems. There was none of it. The atmosphere was clean in the way only an atmosphere maintained by working scrubbers can be clean. The recyclers had been doing their job for 42 years without anyone to do it for. The first thing I saw was a man at a workstation. He was leaning slightly forward. His hands were on the console. His face was turned 3 degrees to the right, as if he had just heard a sound from that direction and was about to look toward it. No wound, no grimace, no spilled cup, no overturned chair, no panic. He had been alive, and then he had not been, and the transition had not required him to move. The body was not preserved. I want to be clear about that. 42 years of station atmosphere had done what 42 years of station atmosphere does, but the posture was preserved. The geometry of the man at the moment he had stopped being a man was still there, held in place by the chair and the console and the small mechanical accidents that decide whether a body falls forward or stays upright. He had not fallen. He had simply stopped. Cross stepped past me and looked at the man's face. He did not speak immediately. He stood there for a span of time I did not measure, because measuring it felt like an intrusion. Long enough that Amara, behind me, glanced at me, and I shook my head a fraction, and she did not move. When Cross finally spoke, he spoke the way a man speaks when he has practiced the sentence in his head and is trying not to let the practice show.
Petrov, atmospheric chemist. He had a daughter on Ceres. She would be in her late 40s now.
That was all. He moved on. But I watched him as he moved, and I noticed that his hand had come up to rest briefly on the back of Petrov's chair as he passed it. Not a gesture of ceremony, not anything that would have read as ceremony to anyone watching from a distance. The kind of contact you make with a thing to confirm it is solid. The kind of contact you make with a thing to confirm you are. Amara did not look at the body. She looked at the console under the body's hands. The screen was dark, but the activity light on the side of the housing was a slow, steady amber. The station's local network was alive. It just wasn't talking to anyone.
Declan,
I see it.
there is going to be a research console, a primary one, purpose-built for the signal. I need to find it.
Then find it. She went. Chapter 3. The names. We moved deeper. Habitation ring 2. Then the lab corridor. There were more. A woman in a bunk on her side, one arm under the pillow. A man at a galley table with a cup at his elbow that had evaporated to a dry brown ring 4 decades ago. 2 technicians in a service bay, sitting on the deck with their backs against opposite walls of the corridor, facing each other. They had been having a conversation. One of them was mid-gesture. His hand had come to rest on his knee. I want to describe the galley to you, because the galley was the room that broke something in me that I did not know was structural. It was a small room. 6-person capacity. Standard pre-sprint construction. A serving line along one wall, 4 small round tables, a viewport that looked out onto the docking arm we had not used. There was a half-finished meal on the table next to the man with the cup. There was a tablet propped against a salt shaker. There was a sweater draped over the back of a chair at a different table, as if its owner had stepped out for a moment and intended to come back. The room had not been abandoned. It had been paused. None of them had reached for anything. None of them had tried to leave. The airlock we had come through was the only pressurized exit on this side of the station, and not one body in any room or corridor was oriented toward it. There were no log entries from the final hours. Amara had checked 2 terminals as we passed. They both stopped at the same timestamp. Not close, Not approximately the same. Identical. Down to the second. I am not an engineer. But I know enough to know that is not what natural failure looks like. Systems fail in sequence. They degrade. They throw errors before they go dark. Two terminals on opposite ends of a station do not stop logging at the same second unless something with access to the whole network told them to. Cross moved through it the way a doctor moves through a ward. He stopped at faces. He named the ones he knew.
Eldana, spectrography, Way, power systems. I don't know him. I don't know her. Marchetti, communications. He was the one who first told me the signal was not propagating. He said it the way you tell someone the weather. He did not understand yet that it was the most important sentence he would ever speak.
He stood at Marchetti's console for longer than he stood at anyone else's. Marchetti had been slumped sideways in his chair, one shoulder against the bulkhead. The headset still hooked over one ear. The other earpiece dangled. Cross did not touch him. He looked at the man's hands, which were folded in his lap, and he looked at the dangling earpiece, and his jaw worked once, very small, and then he said the name, and he moved on. He spoke their names the way you read a list back to make sure none were missed. Not grief, accounting, but I watched him do it for 30 minutes, room by room, and I will tell you what I saw, because I have flown with a lot of people who were good at hiding what was happening to them, and Cross is one of the best I have ever seen, and he was not entirely succeeding. He was not pausing to grieve. He was pausing to remember. There is a difference. Grief is what you do with a loss you have already processed. Remembering is what you do when the loss has just arrived, and you are sorting through which version of the person you are going to be allowed to keep. The version they were when you last saw them, or the version they were at the end. He had walked off the Ardennes in 2263 with 45 colleagues alive behind him on a station, and he had spent 42 years carrying them as living people in his head. And now, in the space of half an hour, he was being asked to overwrite that file with this one. He did it without complaint. He did it room by room. He did it because there was no one else in the universe who could do it, and because not doing it would have been a kind of theft. There were faces he did not know. Several. The research team was larger than what the Ardennes had been told to expect when they made first contact in 2063. I asked Cross about it when he paused at a doorway. How many were there when you left?
When the Ardennes departed, 45. That was the full complement. Researchers, technicians, life support crew, 45.
He did not wait for a response. He moved on to the next door. He was still counting. I did the math after him, quietly, in the part of my head that does math when the rest of me is too tired to. We had passed 12 bodies on the way in. There were going to be many more. And some number of them. Cross would not be able to tell me how many until we were done. Were going to be people he had never met. People who had arrived after the Ardennes left. People who had been brought to a station that did not exist on any chart, to do a job that was not described in any record we had access to. The station had been crewed past 2063. By whom and for how long were questions Cross could not answer, and Cross knew he could not answer. And the not knowing was a weight he was carrying alongside the names. Cross noted everything without comment. 42 years had taught him that comment was the thing you did after the work was done, and the work was not done. Saya was no longer with us. I noticed it the way you notice a missing tool. Not immediately, and then suddenly. I checked her beacon. Habitation ring 3. She had moved off axis from the lab corridor and was now standing in a section of the station that nothing in our briefing required her to be in. I did not call her on comms. I am still trying to decide why. If you're still with me, and I hope you are, because what Amara found at that console is the part I have not been able to stop thinking about. I want to ask you something before we go in. Not what killed them. We'll get to that eventually, in pieces, the way these things come. I want to know what you think it means that none of them ran. There's a comment thread under this episode. Tell me what you see. Subscribe, if you haven't. The signal does not get quieter from here, and I would like you with me when it gets louder. Now, back to the station. Chapter 4. Present everywhere. Amara found the primary research console in a circular bay at the base of the central spine. The room was a half step lower than the surrounding deck, designed, the way old labs were sometimes designed, to make the people inside feel they were stepping down into the work. The instrumentation was extraordinary. I am not the person to assess that, but I have stood next to Amara in enough labs to recognize the look on her face when she sees something she has wanted her entire career to put her hands on. The look she gets is not awe, it is appetite. There were 3 bodies in the bay. She did not look at any of them. She sat down at the principal station, plugged her own slate into the auxiliary port, and brought the system up. It came up clean. 42 years of standby and the local network handed her a session like she had logged out the previous evening. She moved through the menus the way a musician moves through a piece they have not played in years, but were trained to play correctly the first time. No hesitation, no exploration. She knew what she was looking for. The station's interface was 42 years old. The conventions of how research consoles were laid out had not changed as much as the people who designed them probably believed they had.
Declan, come here.
I'm here.
Watch the array map.
She ran the signal through the station's purpose-built sensors. The map filled with returns, inner ring sensors, outer ring sensors, the hull array, the probes that had been seeded into the surrounding volume of space at distances of 1, 10, and 100 kilometers. Probes that, somehow, were still alive. Every sensor lit at the same instant, every one, inside the hull, outside the hull. The corridor we had walked down. The empty volume of space the fault was docked to.
There is no propagation delay between any of these sensors.
That's an instrumentation error.
It is not an instrumentation error. The station has run this calibration 11,000 times. The result has been the same 11,000 times.
Amara.
The signal does not have a direction. It does not propagate. It is present at every sensor simultaneously. It is not arriving from somewhere. It is here.
I want to try to describe what happens on Amara's face when she encounters a result that violates a foundational rule of the discipline she has dedicated her life to. It is not surprise. Surprise is what happens when you find something unexpected within a known framework. This was different. This was the face of a person who has just been handed evidence that the framework itself is wrong, and who is now performing the rapid, silent calculation of how much of her understanding of the universe she is going to have to set aside before she can think clearly again. She set aside a great deal of it. I watched her do it. She did not flinch. I watched her sit with that for 10 seconds. She did not call it out on the open channel. She did not radio cross. She started a new log file on her slate and began writing into it, and I recognized the look on her face as a different one from the appetite. It was the look she got when she was holding a thing too valuable to share with the room until she understood its shape. I stood behind her chair and read over her shoulder for the first 30 seconds, and then I stopped, because what she was writing was not yet language. It was symbols and numbers and short strings of half-words, the kind of shorthand a researcher uses to leave herself a trail of breadcrumbs back to a thought she does not yet trust herself to articulate. The thought was big. I could see that. The thought was big enough that she was building the trail before she let herself walk it. The question I wanted to ask was the obvious one. If the signal is present everywhere, simultaneously, then in what sense is it a signal at all? Signals have origins. Signals have directions. A signal that is present everywhere with no origin and no direction is not behaving like a signal. It is behaving like a property of the space it occupies. I did not ask the question. Amara was already chasing it, and I did not want to interrupt the chase. I left her to it. Chapter 5. The door she did not mention. I went to find Saya. Habitation Ring 3 was the smallest of the 3 rings. 8 rooms off a single curved corridor, 4 to a side. The doors were marked with a system I did not recognize. Department codes, I assumed, until Cross had told me earlier in the walk that the codes were not departmental. They were rank-ordered. Whoever wrote them had wanted to know, at a glance, which room held the highest authority. The door at the far end of the curve had the highest code. Saya was standing in the corridor outside that door. She was not doing anything. She was not searching. She was not scanning. She was standing the way a person stands when they have just finished doing a thing and want the next person who arrives to find them not doing it. Find anything?
The records terminal in there is locked.
Locked how?
Security protocol, still active.
After 42 years?
It's a security protocol, it doesn't expire.
Huh. I stood there for a beat longer than the conversation called for. She held my gaze without effort. She had given me an answer that was technically complete and contained no information I could use. Anything else worth flagging?
Not yet.
All right. I turned and walked back up the corridor. I felt her watch me go for the first 6 steps. Then I stopped feeling it, which I think meant she had stopped looking, which I think meant she had wanted me to know she was looking and had wanted me to know when she stopped. I did not call her on it. Not yet. There is a thing you learn flying with people who carry classified pasts, which is that the moment you ask the question is the moment you commit to whatever answer they choose to give you. I was not ready to commit. I filed the locked terminal in the part of my head where I keep things that will become important in a way I do not yet understand. Chapter 6. What we carried back. We left the station the way you leave a church, quietly, without speaking. Cross was the last one through the airlock. He stopped in the inner door for a moment and looked back down the corridor. And I do not know what he was looking at, because there were 45 faces back there, and he had named most of them, and the rest of them he had not. The clamps released. Tomas eased us off the docking arm with the same patience he had used to bring us in and held us at 2 kilometers, close enough to go back in the morning, far enough to breathe. The station sat on the aft camera. 3 rings, 1 bent docking arm, no lights, unmoving in the dark. Nobody spoke on the bridge for a long time. Cross went to the common room. He sat down at the small round table by the galley, the one that had become his table without anyone deciding it had, and he did not eat. He did not read. He did not access a slate. He sat with his hands folded in front of him, and he looked at the bulkhead. I gave him the room. Amara was at her console before the docking clamps had fully retracted. I do not know what she was writing. I know she did not stop for 6 hours. Saya took her shift on the bridge as scheduled. She did not mention the locked terminal. She did not mention anything. She nodded once when I came up to relieve her, and she went below, and I did not see her again until the next morning. Tomas came up to the bridge an hour after we settled at distance. He did not ask what we had found. He stood next to my chair for a few minutes, and then he asked the only question that mattered.
Is Cross all right?
No.
Will he be?
I don't know yet. He nodded. He went back down to engineering. He did not press. I am recording this in my cabin. The lights are at quarter. The fault is on coast, thermal cycle. All the systems doing the small, steady work that ships do when their captains have run out of orders to give them. It is the quietest the ship has been in 46 days, and it is not quiet enough. Here is what we know. The station is real. The dead are real. Whatever happened on that station happened slowly enough, or quickly enough, that nobody on board took the 4 seconds required to ask for help, to reach for a door, to leave a record of what they were experiencing as they experienced it. The signal we have been chasing for 46 days is not a signal. Not in any sense the word has been used. It does not arrive. It does not propagate. It is present at every sensor we point at it, simultaneously, regardless of where the sensor is. It is the same signal in the corridor as it is on the hull, as it is in the empty space the fault was docked to, as it is, presumably, here in this room, as I record this. Cross has not said another word about the Ardennes since we boarded back. I do not know yet what he is going to say when he does. I do not know yet what Amara is writing. I do not know yet what Saya was doing in the commander's quarters before I found her in the corridor outside it. I keep going back to the galley. The sweater on the chair, the tablet propped against the salt shaker, the half-finished meal. People do not arrange their lives that way unless they expect to come back to them in the next 10 minutes. Whatever happened to them, they did not see it coming, and when it came, they did not have time to know it had come. I keep going back to Marchetti, with the headset hooked over one ear and the other earpiece dangling. He had been listening to something. He had taken one earpiece out because he had been about to speak to someone in the room. The person in the room had not been Cross. Cross had been on the Ardennes, hours away, already losing systems. The person in the room had been someone else, someone I will never have a name for, and Marchetti had taken out the earpiece to speak to them, and then he had not spoken to them, and he had not put the earpiece back. I know this. 45 people sat down on a station that should not exist, and they did not get up, and they did not call out, and they did not run. That is not nothing. I'm trying very hard not to decide what it is yet, because what I decide now is what I will be looking for in the data Amara hands me tomorrow, and I would like to come to that data with my hands open. My father used to tell me, when I was young, when I was learning to fly, when I would come back from a run with a theory about why the cargo had shifted or why the customer had been late. He used to tell me that the worst thing a pilot can do is decide what a problem is before the problem has finished telling him. He said most pilots who die in space die not because they did not know what was wrong, but because they thought they did, and they acted on the wrong thing fast and well. I have been trying to take that advice for 46 days. I have not always succeeded. I am trying to take it tonight, but I will tell you this, the way Cross would tell it. Precise. No drama. The exact value, because the exact value is the only honest one. When we crossed back through the airlock and the station fell away behind us, the signal did not change. Not at all. Not by a single measurable parameter. Whatever it is, we did not leave it on the station. We brought it with us. This was Soul's Edge, Episode 6. What remains? If you've been with me since the signal first went up, thank you. If you're new, start at the beginning. Cross's story does not make sense out of order, and the things we are finding in the dark do not either. Subscribe, comment, tell me what you think happened on that station. I'll be reading. The next episode is going to ask a question I have been avoiding for a long time, and I would like to know what you think the answer is before I have to find out for sure. I'm Declan Shaw. The signal is still here. Wherever here is. I'll see you next jump.